Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome back to my channel. So I had um, feedback from many people, and in general, they like the videos, and they hope I can talk more on the products, which I'm trying to do more videos. Um, for a bit more negative side, what they were saying is it might be too quick, and then it will be better if I add in more materials when I'm talking. So from today onwards, we will be changing the format a little bit, and um, I hope you like it. Otherwise, let me know. Thank you. Hello. Hope you can still see me. Okay, so last time we talked about data in general, and today we're going to talk about the data model for Oracle utility products, including CCB and MDM. I will break that down into four parts. So first we look at the data scope, which means what are the data is involved in terms of Oracle utilities. Second one is a very famous term called V model. So this is a group of objects represent the customer data. And number three, we can talk about different data objects in the system. And number four, we're going to wrap up what else we haven't talked about. When I start to work on a project, normally the first question I would ask is, what is the scope of the project? In reality, the scope of the project actually defines not only the implementation, but also the data scope. So for example, if there is a transformation program on customer service, I would focus on the customer data before I look at any billing or metering data related. So being able to identify the data scope is as important as defining a functional implementation in a project. When I talk about data scope, I always want to mention what is the target customer for a product and what functionality the product is providing. As the scope for this video, I would like to talk about C2M, which includes C2M, include CCB and MDM. They are used to for the utility suppliers mainly for managing the customer billing and metering information. Let's have a look at this product stack in C2M. So if you have a look at the database of C2M, you will see the naming convention, the prefix of the tables. So we start from the bottom layer, which is most fundamental layer, to the top. The first layer is F1 tables. You'll see the table start with F1 underscore. So these are the framework tables. So that would include things like maintenance objects, business objects, or even a fact table. And moving one level above that, that will be the functional tables for the framework. And if you look at those tables, you would realize they are designed for example, like to-do, algorithm, these functional records in the framework. Now above the F1 and the CI, these two layers, we're moving into the product layer. So C1 is a framework for the customer. So when you look at the bill, it's always the C1 bill and also C1 payment. So these are the table for the customer, and you can argue whether C1 and D1 sits in parallel layer, because potentially you can treat them as separate products. But in the diagram I put D1 above CCB because actually MDM use a lot of functionality of the framework, and some of them are related to CCB tables. So these tables will have D1. Sometimes you see D2 tables. It was just another version of the metadata products. So let's say D1 initial measurement data, D1 service point. So these are the tables you will see in the D1 layer. Okay, let's look at part 2, which is the V model. I believe most of the developer already heard about this V model before. It's very famous because it includes the main objects in CCB, and it can be shaped look like a V, and that make you remember it easily. Okay, let's look at the details of this V model. Okay, so this is a snapshot taken from the C2M version of the V model. Let's talk through these objects in this V model. So let's start from the left, which is customer, left top customer. So customer represents an entity, which could be actual person, or a business entity. The customer actually represents a different roles. So it could represent a customer, or it can actually present a broker, which is quite often in the B2B business in utilities. So it can be used to model different roles, the entity with different roles. Okay, so moving one level down, which is the account. So account here, the only thing I want to mention is account is a billing account. So many people who have worked on CRM before, CRM, when you log into the system, look at the account, normally it's the customer account, which means it contains all the customer information. But no, in C2M it's the billing account, which is a collection of financial information for the customer, and it could include bill, payment, adjustment, all these financial information in C2M. So under account, we will have service agreement. Service agreement is something very similar to a contract, but it's more focusing on the financial part of the contract. So it includes all the prices, terms and conditions, and also what is the override price. If the customer has a special price, it links to a rate in the system which tells how to calculate the bill. So this is a very important entity in the C2M data object, and we will see it very often. I mean, if you are working on C2M, I'm sure you probably haven't missed that. Okay, Some of the service agreements, they are on its own because they are not usage based, but most of the energy products, they are usage based. So you see the service agreement is linked to a service point via service agreement service point relationship, which means actually if you have a service point, if you change the contracts or changing the billing method, you might end up with a new service agreement linked to your account. So this gives the flexibility how the data can be modeled. On the service point, actually when you link to MDM part, there will be much more information. For example, like device measurements we have seen on the diagram. If you link the service point to field activity request, this is the field work application. Service point is a very important term in utilities because it's the point where the usage is measured. Now, we have to differentiate between a service point and the device. Because device, normally it's a physical device. A meter, if its meter is broken, it can be replaced. But service point has a unique number which identifies this is the usage, this is the unique usage collection point for the customer. It can be either import if the customer is using the energy from utility, or it could be export meter, which means the customer, for example, they have a solar panel, they export the energy back to the grid. And of course, the service point is linked to premise. Premise is a location. So for example, in your home, you might not have just one meter, you might have multiple. I mean, for sure, if you have a gas and electricity, you would have 2 meters, and they can both model as service point, but you only have one address. So this V model gives a lot of flexibility and is support different scenarios, B2B, B2C, INC, and I've seen a lot of implementation to have multiple level of accounts to model the framework contract, for example. So it is very powerful data model, and actually when you look at the Oracle website, they actually have a product just for the data model, for the utility data model, which is based on this. Okay, next we're going to move on to the data objects, which is the ones we have not discussed yet. I want to give you a very brief view on what are the other objects we are talking about. If it's not billing, if it's not customer, if it's not service point, which we just talked through. This is a list of objects which I think you must be seeing in the system if you have work on the product. So we talked through customer information, we talked through billing, and there's a rate object. The rate object is the rating engine, how the calculation rules are defined for the bills, and they are actually very, very flexible and powerful to allow complex billing in different ways. Okay, we will talk through the billing later in other videos. Fact record is a generic object in the system. A lot of people use fact records to model custom objects, which I think it's a good one to use comparing with custom objects, because the fact record actually provide two ways of extension. One is the club and one is the characteristic. So you have a choice of how to extend fact record to model your custom object, which in most of the project it is essential actually. Okay, next is data sync. Actually, after moving to C2M, data sync seems to be disappeared, but actually it's not. It's just being automated. Before C2M, we have two systems, CCB and MDM, and you need to keep data sync between two systems. And there is a bunch of objects used for the data sync. We will see a bit later in this video on these objects. They have financial transactions, adjustment, field order, payment, to-do. To-do is a very interesting one because we always see there's so many to-dos in the system. So, I mean, you won't miss it, but we'll talk later about to-do because I think people are overusing to-do in many cases. Batch job, that's an obvious one. Credit and collection, workflow and notification. Service task. Service task is quite often used with the field activities because they are more like a work item. They can be scheduled. So it is something. If your project is mainly focused on billing, then you probably don't see this very often. If it's more around field activity integration, you will see this object. And then we'll move on to sales and marketing. To be honest, there is a part of C2M dealing with sales and marketing, but they are not very strong. There is an object called campaign, which I remember, but normally campaign, well, I mean, the functionality of campaign is quite strong and unique, and it's easy to configure as well. But I think it is more useful for the residential part because it will be a series of questions the customer need to answer, and then you actually know what the customer actually wants from. It's more like a marketing tool. However, B2B is much more complicated with the question and answer style. You can't really. It's not very easy to use. Okay, so this part I don't know a lot of utility use that, especially the B2B. And then move on to next row is the metadata. Obviously, this is the F1 layer we just talked about. Device measurement, IMD, is all MDM related. We'll talk about that during MDM discussions. Okay, what else? Let's find out. Right, so last but not least, I have 4 small topics to quickly go through. So the first one is 360 view. So this is actually a quite useful functionality in the system. So when we talk about 360 view, that means if you look at a particular, let's say, service point, It is able to find out, under the current context, what are the related objects. It will show, if you look at the dashboard on the right hand side, normally there will be a tab saying, there will be a zone and saying it's a current context. It will show you what is the person, account, premise. So it is very good tool to link everything together, give you the view of which customer you are presenting, which customer you are referencing, and using that you can easily navigate and find out customer information. Now, look at the second one I would like to talk about is admin object. I mean, there are lots of admin object, but there's one type of table I probably never mentioned. In the system, if you look at the prefix of the tables, I don't know if you realize there is some tables start with SC underscore. Now those are the security tables. If you're interested, have a look what they are and what they do. Okay, the next topic is merged maintenance. This actually happened quite recently. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And also the CCB and MDM data mapping. Although the data sync is not there anymore, but these objects are still existing. And they are actually linked to the data, the merged maintenance. So let's go through that. Alright, so there are a lot of context here. Merged maintenance is a new feature in C2M, I think since C2M 2.7. Now, before C2M, we have CCMB, a set of data, like the V model, mapped to MDM objects, and these objects they need to be closely linked, mapped, because the data need to synchronize from CCMB to MDM in most of the cases. However, after C2M, there is a sort from maybe from the product, maybe from the customer. On the same framework, you now have different products: CCMB, MDM, SGG, SOM, Service Order Management. So why do we even need a sync object anymore? We could have a synchronized view based on the maintenance object, which means if you change in CCMB, the data will automatically synced to MDM, not via the sync object anymore, but via the maintenance object. Now, I'm not a big fan of this, because you have to split that into two different ways. One is, if you're a new customer, I think that's fine. As long as you know how it works, it's fine. But if you're an existing customer, you must have some customized rules. And you have to change all these rules, being able to adopt to this new way. That's not very easy, actually. It's because when we look at, for example, just the service point, you might have dozens of characteristics. You don't want everything being synchronized to MDM. For example, you only want the metering related characteristic to be synchronized. But then you have to reconfigure it. That's a lot of work. So this is a reason, for some reason I like it, but some reason I don't. If you are interested, have a look at the Oracle documentation website and you find more details. Right, the last one. So this is the CCB-MDM data mapping. If you work on C2M, you must know how the objects are linked, because sometimes you need to model in a way. If you add a characteristic, let's say on the service agreement, and then you know it needs to go on to usage subscription on the MDM side. So this kind of data model gives you the reference of how the object is mapped, and also some of them you can see it's a composite link, composite sync. So from account, service agreement adding together, they actually map to the same object in MDM, which is called usage subscription. Similar thing happened for the service point, and you can see this is list of objects, how they've been linked, how they're mapped and synced within the two systems. Now on the right hand side, there are a few green boxes. Now these ones are quite new actually. When I work on C2M project before, I didn't actually see them. They might be new, but it's good to have a look at them and see what they do. Okay, so I leave you to examine if they are helpful for your project. Right, so that's the end of this video, and I have changed a little bit of format, and I hope you like the new format. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. And also, if you found the video useful, like the video and subscribe it. Thank you very much, and see you next week.